Welcome to the podcast. Today, my guest is Mr. Rod Ford. So, Rod, give us a very quick synopsis throughout the years leading up to Galapagos Duck and beyond.
Well, I'm a Queenslander to start with. I was born in Atherton, in the Atherton Tablelands, and my mother played piano, and my father didn't play anything, but he was a really good ballroom dancer. Yeah. And both my brothers were musicians, and so I grew up with music around me all the time. I didn't really play anything until we moved to Cairns, and then I took up, I had a drum kit for a little while, and then up there guys like Alan Harborne, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, he's a spectacular player, was at the Bourbon and Beefsteak bar in Sydney for many years, and Paul Zemmet, probably one of the greatest talents I've ever seen. You know, Ricky May used to try and talk him to come in and join his band down here in the Gold Coast all those years ago, but he wouldn't come down. But he played like 8 instruments, all just natural, most natural player I've ever seen. You know, pick up a violin, pick up a saxophone, bass, piano, guitar, anything. It didn't matter to him. And anyway, so my parents bought me a drum kit, but the musos up there would have lots of plays, and my brothers would forever take my kit out to these plays, so I never really got to play the kit, you know. And by the time I did, it was so gone. I couldn't play it. Well, I couldn't play it anyway. And then I didn't do anything music. I was into sport. I love sports a lot, and I grew up across the tracks where the Heather May Reading and Wilma Reading and all those people lived on the other side of the railway line, and I was really good friends, you know, school friends with Warwick, who was the bass player, who played with that Dutch guitar player, what's his name, Jan Ackerman. Oh! Yeah, he's on a couple of recordings of Jan Ackerman, strangely enough, from all those years later. And but I didn't play anything, but I was exposed to they're part Polynesian, half Australian, I think. But the harmonies they had. So I was exposed to all this. It's not just the harmonies that they had, it's the blend when they sing it. They have they can hear the blend. That was the thing I learnt from them. And many years later, I worked with a couple of Maori bands, and there was one guy he used to sing like 3 feet away from the microphone. I said, what are you doing, Billy? He said, mate, if you want it to sound like they mixed it on the record, you got to position yourself to make it. He knew how far to be away to make it sound like that. Instead of singing on right, you know, most guys when they do harmonies, they're right on top of it, and you got to pull it down so that it sounds like that. But he knew how to get it. You know.
G'day everyone. Just a short interruption. Please hit the subscribe button. It's a massive help to me. I'm trying to grow the channel. And there's a lot of work goes into putting these podcasts together, and any help that you can give me in doing that is much appreciated. Thanks. Hope you enjoy the podcast.
And so I was really blessed to, first of all, to be around people that were really good at what they naturally, they weren't superstars or anything, they just were great natural musicians, you know. So I saw that end of it, and I grew up, probably my first record, I come from the jazz essentially, but being Atherton, I heard tons of country, you know, put your sweet lips a little closer, all those things. And so I knew all those tunes. Yep. I love the Beatles, a lot of other pops. I love pop music, but I love jazz too. There wasn't anything I didn't really like, I don't think, and which was a bit funny in those days because there was a lot of, you know, musical segregation, yeah. And so in the end, I wasn't game to say what I liked and didn't like, you know, because you'd get ostracised from whatever group was into it. Oh. So I just kept it to myself and, you know, just kept going. I love the Beatles, you know. I couldn't believe how guys who had no education could just write song after song and talk about natural ability to harmonise together.
Yeah, and what are the chances of a combination of those type of people to produce that thing?
Mind-boggling. And from a drum point of view, Ringo was the first guy that I noticed in a pop sense, not a jazz sense, but in a pop sense, I thought, this guy's got a different feel to all the other guys. You know, what is it? What is it? You know, like he commands something from it. It doesn't matter whether you're a drummer or not a drummer, but a lot of people have that same thing, and I'm thinking, what is it that this guy's got? And years later, I found out that when he held the stick, he held it right back at the end.
He also talked about the fact that he was left-handed playing a right-handed kit, and he couldn't do a roll the normal way around a kit, so he would actually start from the floor tom and do a roll back.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of his things sounded very different to other drummers.
As opposed to Charlie Watts, who was a jazz drummer. I don't think I've not heard that Ringo played a note of jazz in his life.
No, I don't think he did.
But you can tell from his sense of humour, he's a left-of-field thinker.
Yes.
So it wouldn't matter how he held the drums or whatever. That's just in his nature.
They were very inventive parts that he came up with. Like
Incredible.
you think about Come Together and that bum dum ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum, very unique parts.
Yeah. No, it was. He was a great thing for a lot of drummers. The amount of great American drummers, jazz drummers, funk drummers, Latin drummers, fusion drummers that were inspired by Ringo, not by Buddy Rich, not by Louis Bellson or whoever was the guy of the day.
Yeah.
Nearly all of them. Steve Smith from Journey.
Wow.
So many of them were inspired by Ringo to take up the drums, you know.
Yeah.
So his feeling that he could get out on the drums, it was really unique, you know. And years later, I realised that's what I loved about it, you know. Anyway, getting on to how I started playing, and then I went down to Sydney when I was 12. My parents split up, and I went to live with my aunt and uncle. And my brothers had already moved from Cairns down to Sydney years before that. So they were there somewhere in Sydney, you know. And in that, at the school I decided I'd go in the school orchestra. What was I going to play? What do I like? I love trombone, right?
Okay.
So,
where did that come from?
well, it's got a mellow sound, you know. Sometimes the trumpet's really brash and out there, but I like the mellow sound of the trombone, you know. So I picked the trombone out, played it for a while. I loved it, you know. And then I had a moment of reflection, and I thought, do I really want to carry a trombone case around for the rest of my life? Do I love it that much? And I thought, no, not really. So I thought I'll make a decision. So I put the trombone back into the school where they kept all the instruments and took a flute out. I thought that'll be much easier, you know, like carrying, I can go anywhere, put it under my arm, away I go, you know. So I get home with the flute and I go, and I nearly fainted. Like, it takes, unless you know how to blow a flute properly, you can expire, you could fall over and be dead, you know. I thought, oh no, I've made
Death by flute!
I've made the wrong decision here. So anyway, in the meantime, there was this big kerfuffle at the school. We're down a flute, but we've got a trombone back. What's happened, you know? So I got hauled over the coals, and in the end, they said, look, why don't you play trumpet? So I liked trumpet, and I'd listened a lot to Clifford Brown, who was in the early Miles Davis days, and I just loved his playing, you know, great sound, incredible fluidity, melodical genius, the guy was, right? So I'd have these things singing in my head. I'd be singing all, you know, that he'd play, and I'm thinking, oh, well, why don't I have a go at the trumpet, you know, if I'm singing in my head? So I get the trumpet, and, you know, I liked it. I loved it. But it was one of those things that when you're beginning on an instrument like that, because you love it, doesn't mean that people around you are going to love it you know.
And you're developing your lip, and it's loud, and,
and
and you're annoying the crap out of people.
And we were living in this place in Newport, and on the ground floor, and there were big yards and stuff, but we had my room was facing to the people's back, the next door neighbour's back porch. You know, right. One day I'm practicing and I'm doing really well. I'm thinking, wow, I'm really improving. And all of a sudden, there's this water comes through the window. Like the guy had enough, you know. Like he threw a bucket of water through the window at me.
Maybe he thought it was two cats fucking. Isn't that what you do? Throw a bucket of water on?
Yeah. And anyway, moving along, I went to live with my brother who was in Bondi. He was living in Bondi Road, and in Sydney, he was in Randwick first, and then I got a job in recording music. My first job was publishing thing, and I used to put orders together and take them to where they had to be. And I noticed they had all these big band charts of Neil Hefti and all these really good writers. And because they were a classical publishing company, not in the year I was there, there wasn't one inquiry to buy a big band chart. So bit by bit, I copied them all, right? I copied all, and I thought, well, what am I going to do with these, you know? And I thought, even if you're going to have all these big band charts, you probably want a big band to play them, you know? So I'm 17 and I was an average trumpet player, but I thought, no, you know, youth and gung-ho and all that. And I used to practice a lot and listen a lot, and so I put this big band together, all right?
So where did you get the people from?
Well,
did you advertise, or did you?
Well, see, because my brothers they were well known in the Sydney scene. Like my brother Warren was a keyboard, and he was with Marsha Hines for 20 years playing strings. And when Jack Esarski and Greg Tell and Mark Kennedy, he played with all those guys in the bands. But he was essentially a jazz player, but he had a good sense of harmony, and so he knew string writing and how to make them work. And they'd tried other people and stuff, but they didn't have the harmonic knowledge, how to really make a string thing. He'd studied Don Sebesky and people like that, their books, and did a lot of work. And my other brother was a bass player who he worked with a band called The Chant in Sydney, which was Mick Kenny. You know Mick?
No.
He was the founding member of Crossfire.
Oh, okay.
With Jim Kelly.
Yep.
And they had this band. They used to do all the Chicago and Blood, Sweat and Tears thing. You know, and then all Blood, Sweat and Tears. And Mick was a really good writer. He'd arranged all the horn parts and all that. He played keyboard and trumpet, which was Mick and I's connection because we both played trumpet. And anyway, so I was brought up. I had both of them, and everybody knew my brothers.
Yep.
Right. So it didn't matter where I went. People wouldn't say, "Oh, how you going, Rod?" They'd say, "Oh, how's your brothers?" You know, that would be my hello. You know, and so I got used to it. It didn't bother me. It was a privileged position to be in, really. And so I knew a lot of people by proxy. You know.
Yep.
And so I'd ring people up, say, "Look, I'm making this big band." And I think I knew Willie Qua in those days. We were both the same age, so we were both 16, 17. And through that, I knew Marty Mooney, who was the guy that actually put the Galapagos Duck together, you know, even though he left quite early. But he put it together, and then it morphed into other things. And through that, I knew a lot of people, horn players. I got to know Marty, who I got in the big band. And then I had people like Billy Nuku. You know Billy Nuku?
No, I don't know.
He's a Maori drummer, had a great feel. And if I'm not wrong, at one stage he played with Lou Rawls.
Oh, okay.
I could be wrong, that was always my understanding. But he just was a really musical guy, you know. Came through the jazz, funk, rock, He played a lot of things. And then I had guys like Phil Terror, who was in the first version of the Jazz Co-op, which was Roger Frampton, still the most creative player I've ever played with in my life. And Roger, he passed away from a tumour many years ago. Roger Frampton, Jack Thorncraft, the bass player who lives not too far from where we are, and Howie Smith, who was the guy that Don Burrows brought over from Texas to make the first jazz conservatorium. It was the first time it had ever been done, and Howie was just mind-boggling, man. Like his ability to teach, to impart
Information
and feeling.
Yeah.
A lot of people can do information, but it's the feeling and how to get it, especially like in those days. There's a lot of great players, like guys like Errol Buddle and Cole Jones, who I was talking to you about before. Cole used to play with all the top players in Sydney, right? So, and Cole Jones has got one of the best musical abilities, and being a trumpet player, and I was a trumpet player, I hear him play the lines that I came up with, and he just nails them,
Yeah.
He's fantastic. Anyway, so we get the big band together. I knew all these people, and I had access. And to my surprise, people all said yes. Hardly anyone said no that I remember of, a long time ago. And so we used to rehearse in the same place as the Daley Wilson Band, in the Stage Club in Cleveland Street in Sydney. So I'm working in recordings in the day, putting orders together for classical music, and by night I'm organising big bands. It was quite hilarious. But I wasn't very confident. I thought, if I use my name, I'm not that great. I'm not a real good trumpet player. I'm 17. I've only been playing it 2 years, so it was a bit sort of okay. I could read, but there was a few sketchy things in there. And so I thought, what'll I do? What'll I call the band? So I called it the Endor Droff Big Band, which is Rodney Ford back to front, And I thought no one will ever know, And and to my surprise, all these people, like really good people, came in. And then I thought, I had another brainwave. I thought, how am I going to do this? Like, I don't know, and they're going to know in a week that I don't know that much about it, or whatever I do know is going to be exhausted within 2 weeks. So I'm going to have to find another way to run this thing, So I rang up people like Billy Weston, who was Channel 10's musical director. I asked Warren Daly and Ed Wilson, Boof Thompson and Jack Iverson, who were the top trumpet players in Sydney at that time. They were recording everything. I said, look, I'm 17 years old, I'm ta-da-ta-da-da, would you like to come and take a big band, just not every week, just once a week, and I'd get all these great names and rotate them. So instead of having one idea, I used them all.
Oh, that's awesome.
And they all said yes. I went, wow.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So one week I'd have Warren Daly doing it, next week Boof Thompson and Jack Iverson, who played lead trumpet when Frank Sinatra came out here.
Wow.
And Sinatra wanted to take him back to America. He was so good, So that's the calibre of people that I had there.
That's awesome.
And I thought, if I can get these guys in there, because everything I'd been part of was one guy giving his idea of how things were. But even in that early stage, life's not like that. There's a million ideas out there, and it's more important, what I thought, to have those ideas come in as early as you can, different ideas, so it's not set in concrete, So you learn to adapt the idea, and you take it on, you learn it properly, but then you open up and say, well, I can put that over here. Now I've got to put that over there. Forget I even know that, right? And learn how to do it with the next idea.
Yeah.
And which opens your mind, It opens your mind and creativity.
I guess that would have been a wonderful thing for the whole big band to have that experience of having all those different band leaders.
It was fantastic, man. It was. I can't tell you how incredible it was, you know, and it set me up for the rest of my life, because I had success with that, and to watch it all work at 17, you know, making this work, and I've got all these people, great people at that time, much further advanced than I was, and it was incredible to have that. And a lot of those guys from that band, when Daley Wilson band, they were doing all the Benson and Hedges tours at that stage. They went to Russia, they went to America, did world tours. But Warren would take the guys out of my band, you know. It was like a
breeding ground. It's like the breeding ground for the.
It became like an incredible thing, you know. And anyway, so what was the question?
What led from there to getting to Galapagos Duck? Is there? I can imagine there's probably quite a.
Stop interrupting. Look,
sorry. That's right. You're going to tell the story, and then I've got to think of the question that asked to go with it. Okay.
No. So anyway,
I was hoping for a quick synopsis, and then we'd get into detail, but that's okay.
I'm not like that. I can't do that stuff. I drive my wife insane, you know, like you get to the 20 minutes you take to tell a story, you know, and then because your age is setting in now, and then you forget the tag at the end. So that's in front of us, I got to tell you.
Well, you know.
So anyway, getting back to it, the way I got started on the drums, I then got called guys like Mick Kenny, John Connolly, who's the bass player and leader of the Duck, Rick Best, who's the leader of Sweet Thunder here. We're all the same age. We're all 70, 71, you know. And so call up, the national service, Vietnam was on those days, and I had. I joined, so I decided to join the army instead of being called up. I thought the chances are I'm going to get called up. I'll go first and find out how this can be to my advantage. So I went and, you know, they give you cheap house loans and free dental care, and you know, and I thought, wow, this is not a bad thing for me to be going for, you know. Anyway, so I joined the army, and I went in on trumpet, and after a while I thought, oh man, I'm not, you know, I was struggling, not with the music part of it, but from the physical, just playing it, you know. I thought maybe I'm not cut out to do this, you know. So I had a breathing problem, so I went to a singing teacher to learn to diaphragmatically breathe and stuff like that. In the meantime, I couldn't stand listening to myself on the trumpet anymore, so I said to the guy, I said, look, would it be all right if I went on the clarinet, you know? And he said, oh yeah, we need a clarinet, you know. So anyway, so I go on to clarinet, and mind you, in those days, in the 70s, it was we probably were part of the worst clarinet section you've ever heard in your life, you know, because I was on first clarinet in 6 months. That shows you how average it was. And anyway, in the meantime, I'm having singing lessons, right? So that Godfrey Sterling was his name, and he taught all guys like Sandy Scott, and I think he might have done Renee Gayer at one stage and all that. But he was an old English guy who taught brass band, you know, and he was fantastic. He was just the most incredible influence. He had ethics, like strongest ethics I've ever seen, you know. I'll give you an example. I said to him one day, I said, oh, Godfrey, he said, I'm a bit upset today. I said, what's happened? He said, I had a call from the tax department, you know. I said, oh, that's not good. He said, no. He said, well, I said to them, look, I just want to pay what I'm supposed to pay. I don't want to pay any more, any less. I just want to pay what I'm supposed to pay. And the guy from the tax department kept saying, look, we'll do this and we'll do that and we'll get your amount right down. He said, I don't want that. He said, I don't want that. I want to pay what I'm supposed to pay. you know. And he said, I had to have an argument with this guy for like half an hour on the phone so that I could pay what I'm supposed to pay, you know. And I mean, that sort of ethics, you know, it's hard to come by, you know, in any stage of anyone's life, you know. It was huge. Anyway, so he got me for 3 months walking around with my finger on my belly button and middle of your chest and your belly button, and your diaphragm's about there, right? In a imaginary sort of thing, and just learning how to breathe without forcing, you know, like, because a lot of trumpet players injure themselves because they force it. You don't know well, you being a singer and a great singer, I don't know what you learned about it, but...
Yeah, I've been really lucky. I've managed to get this far and do a lot of singing and probably, and not, as far as I know, do any damage. As you can tell, my voice at the moment's quite a bit croaky.
Yeah.
And that's, I had a bronchial infection and I'm just recovering from that still.
How many nights a week do you work with singing with your voice?
It's a lot less these days than it used to be. In the mid to late 80s and then 90s and 2000s, it was probably 5 or 6 nights a week. And sometimes you do 2 gigs on a Saturday and 2 gigs on a Sunday.
And you're singing hard, the stuff you're doing. Is
Yeah,
really
a lot of the stuff is
hard,
really like in loud rock bands. Yeah. And not so much anymore. There's still a little bit of that, but not near the same amount. I'm not punishing my voice as hard as I used to. And when you're doing that many gigs a week, you get to a point where you're very gig fit, and it makes it a lot easier to get through any physical hurdles that you might have. You learn to work around it. You learn to be able to sing through it. And like I say, fortunately, as far as I know at the moment, I haven't done any damage.
Do you do warm-ups before you start?
No. I should. Worked with a couple of guys who are monster, amazingly good singers who've shown me a couple of techniques, blowing through the straw and that sort of thing.
Well, Billy Fields, right, who at one stage, he did a lot of damage to his voice, right? And so he ended up doing the sound and being the PR guy for the Duck at one stage.
Okay.
You know?
Because he had Rhinoceros Studios in Sydney, didn't he? He owned that.
Yeah, but he moved all his stuff to Gosford, where he now lives.
Okay.
And John Connolly, the Duck band leader, they become good mates because they just live around the corner from each other, you know, or a couple of suburbs away, you know. Yep. So anyway, Billy ends up being the sound guy, you know, and so we get to room together on tours and stuff, and I ended up talking to him a lot, and he was telling me that he'd done some damage to his voice, you know.
Because he had that very, can't help myself, bad habits. He had that really sounded like he had something going on.
I always wonder with those guys, you know, I've got another friend who built studios, in fact, and he's a skinny white guy, tall, skinny, and he talks like this, but when he sings, Georgia, and I'm thinking, where does that come from? How do you get that?
Yeah.
You know? And I'm thinking, that can't be good for you, you know?
I guess it's that thing if that's naturally what his voice does when he sings.
No, but it's not natural. Because he grew up with that sound and he liked that sound of Ray Charles and all that. He's a skinny white guy from Sydney trying to get that sound. But who knows what his real voice sounds like? You know what I mean? And a lot of people that grew up like that, just playing, listening to the record and trying to emulate it. Well, going back to Billy, it was a similar thing with Billy, and I said to him, do you do any exercises? And then you got to remember that guys like yourself and Billy and myself, we're lazy singers. We do what you have to do for the gig.
Yes.
You know, so there's no way in the world, doesn't matter whether Pavarotti walked in here and showed you all his exercise, you'd say, oh, that's really fantastic, and you'd never think about it again, you know?
Yes.
Whereas I'd say to Billy, I said, look, this is not much that you got to do to warm your voice up, but just things like going, find a low note to start with, and until you can feel things starting to vibrate in your head. You can do it on your way driving to the gig, you know, and you just do it. You don't force it, you know. You just warm it up really slowly, you know, and then when you start to feel things vibrating in there and your head going tingly like that, then you move on to another note. Yeah, so could be from Burley Heads to Miami. Then you get to Miami and you change from Miami to Southport. You go, you open it up and you get the palate in the roof of your mouth. You start to get the vibration into that by E, you know, all your vowel sounds.
Yeah. It's not the sort of easiest thing to do actually when you're actually at the gig.
No, but in the car on your own, when you're driving to the gig, it's the perfect time to do it, right? So I got Billy into doing this, and he was telling me, he had a range of about 3 notes at one stage, you know?
Oh, wow.
And so bit by bit, I said to him, just do this on your way to the gig. I know you're not going to sit there for hours doing it, and that's not the point of it, you know? The point of it is you got to admit that you're a lazy singer, you know?
And warm your voice up.
Warming your voice up and be respectful to it, you know? It's just a physical thing, and if you don't do it, it's going to come back and bite you at some stage, you know. So he did it. I don't know, I wasn't there, but I'd talk to him every now and then. He'd say, "It's starting to work," you know. And he said, "I've got an octave. Now I've got an octave and a bit."
Was this before or after he had the big hit with Bad Habits?
Oh, this is much after. This is only like, I've been in the Gold Coast 7 years, probably 10, 12 years.
Okay.
Yeah. And but he was really torturing himself with his voice, you know. You could hear it. And when I'd listen to him, I'd think, man, you don't have long left, Bill, you know, like. But he was telling me not so long ago, we talked, and he said, I'm really I'm enjoying singing again, you know. And so he just started doing little warm-ups and then falsetto things, like, as you did with then you go and try and hold the note. Don't worry if you can't do it, but just try and do it softly and
so you're not doing any damage, and it's just warming things.
It's warming things up, you know. And anyway, back onto the drums. How did you get me there? You know.
Hang on.
I've got to be careful of you, Scott. You know.
Hang on, we've only got. How much time have we got?
So anyway, I'm on I'm playing clarinet now in the army, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm having these singing lessons, and all of a sudden, every now and then I go and pick the trumpet up, and after about 6 months, I could play top Fs, you know. I could play what I wanted to play, what I heard, you know, and I could play top notes.
And it's all because of the warming up and the
breathing.
And
essentially, the breathing had just changed completely,
everything.
You know.
Yeah.
And I said, to the captain, I said, "Can I go back on the trumpet?" He said, No, you can't go back. So, which was a godsend, you know, because I got to sit in a clarinet section, and in a military band, the clarinets are the violins from a symphony. You know, we used to play a lot of classical pieces, all sorts of music in the military band. But the clarinet, you know, you get to see all these runs like you'd never think of. If you didn't play violin or clarinet, you'd never ever be faced with that situation, you know. So like, for example, in a march, for example, you're going, on the trumpet, you're going, right?
Yeah.
But the clarinet lines, they're all going, you know, the runs of 7s, 13s, 15s, which is what the violins, you know. I'd never come across. I thought, how am I going to play all those notes together like that, you know? And fortunately,
fingers working a bit.
You know, clarinet, all your fingers are really close to it, so it's a matter of lifting them off, you know, getting them off quick enough, you know. And I learned a shitload out of that. It was one of the best times of my life, you know, like for understanding music in a physical, being in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Hearing arrangements, what guys have done, how they're getting this sound out. Because when you're playing the trumpet, you know, trumpet players are pretty brash, you know, and all they're worried about is going, and when they're finished playing their note, you know, they look at each other and go, what about that? You hear that one? And they're not listening to music at all most of the time.
Oh,
You know?
I can see that now. having worked with horn sections, that makes perfect sense.
You know. So anyway, in the middle of all this, I used to muck around on the drums in the army band, right? I'd sit there and practice. There was a couple of kits there, and I'd learn a bossa nova and a jazz feel and a rock feel, and I could play them all at my own tempo, you know. And anyway, one day the trombone player came in. He used to work in a club band. He came in and said, "Oh, Rodney," he said, "You want to play a gig tonight?" And I thought he meant trumpet, right? I said, "Oh, yeah. Well, what are we doing? You know, club gig, you know, Sweet Caroline and all that stuff, you know." And so after about 15 minutes, he said, "Right, okay, well, we'll have to get you a kit." I said, "What are you talking about, a kit? I thought you meant trumpet." He said, No. He said, "Drums." I said, "Yeah, but," I said, "Mate," I said, look, I can play a few feels on it, but that's not like going and doing a gig where at my tempo, I can't do it at anyone else's tempo, you know." and he said, No, you'll be right. You'll be right. And I said, "Yeah, but in those days in Sydney, you know, you used to get all the acts coming in, and you might have 4 acts in a row. You walk in a room.
They give you the charts?
Yeah, 4 lots of 45-minute music, you know, and they're saying, remember in this second chart here, don't do this. It says do it, but don't do it, right? And by the time you get through 4 hours of this music of don't do this and do that and don't
Fix
do
your
this,
chart.
I'm thinking, I'm not going to remember any of this at all, you know. And I thought, oh, mate, I said, look, I can read notes because I was a pretty good reader of notes, but I said, drums is not like that. When you read on the drums, you've got to know the horn lines that you were playing. Plus, you've got to go ding, ding, duck, ding, 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 digga, 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 you know. You've got to have all that, be ready to either play that phrase or not play the phrase and know when to do it and not to do it, you know. I said, I don't know how to do any of that on the drums, you know. Anyway, at the end of the conversation, I said, what if I get a fast accordion player, you know? I'll go, I said, I'll be gone I'll last about 3 bars, you know? He said, no, there won't be any of them. So I thought, oh, man, you know, and I said, in the end, I thought, no, this is ridiculous, man, ridiculous. And his final words to me, which changed my life, were it's $75 a night in 1975. I said, I'm a drummer. and that's how I started playing the drums, you know. Like I used to go and watch guys like Mark Kennedy, still one of my heroes, you know. Like
yeah, I had Ray Burton on the podcast a few weeks ago, and Ray worked with Mark Kennedy, and he always raved about how wonderful it was to work with Mark.
Mate,
I think he was in Ayers Rock. Ray, one of the bands that Ray put together when he got back from America at one point.
Oh, well, he might have started it, you're saying?
Yeah, I think he did.
Oh. But anyway, Mark was I used to go and watch him, I think. This guy just exhilarates me, you know, like it's amazing, you know. And in all the years, we're talking 1970, before I started playing the drums, before I was in the army, I used to go and watch him. So I'm probably 17, 18, and I didn't start playing drums till I was 20. So all those years I went to watch him, I must have been really interested in drummers too. You know, I'd go and watch him, and Alan Turnbull is another hero of mine in jazz things. John Pache, who was a left-handed like Ringo. They were all great influences, but Mark stood out to me because every time he played a tune, I'd forget about the drums. I said, geez, that feels good. You know?
Yeah.
And I can tell, you know, Harry Bruce,
Yep.
he puts a lot of clips up. I can tell in the one bar
Whether
if
it's
it's marked
Kennedy
or not.
Yeah.
One bar. And what killed me one day was, it was, one of the tracks was ding, 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 just with a side stick, right? I went, that's Mark. You know, I could tell from a side stick the groove was already there that I knew, you know. Mark was with Leo Sayer.
Yep.
Who else was he with? Oh, he's just done. I can remember the days I used to do a little bit of recording at EMI in Sydney, and Mark, being a great drummer, I'm there doing a session like not even a third of his ability, you know, and he's in there tuning. He's got the gig tuning the drums for the session for Duran Duran.
Oh, yeah.
And he used to make a lot of his money by tuning drums for overseas acts and stuff, you know, let alone playing. I mean, he was probably better than most of the drummers that he was tuning the drums for, you know. But yeah, so anyway, moving along. Look, if you stop interrupting, I could get it all out. You know?
You've accepted a $75 gig.
$75 gig. I'm at.
How did the gig go?
I was there for 2 years.
Yeah, but like had that first night, how did it go?
I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell. Like I would have been in such. The other thing was, in that band, I could read, but I couldn't play the drums, and they could play, but they couldn't read. So I knew where we should have been, and they had no idea where they should have been. But if they did, they could have played a note that fit the right spot. Anyway, this night, the guy, what do you call it? Female impersonator comes in, you know. And we had it was like a Shadows band, the first one. Booker Highland was the MD. He was the singer in the band. And he had a hit here with Calendar Girl in the early days in Sydney. So he'd come out and do old rockers, all these old rock tunes, you know. And anyway, but the act would come on, this female impersonator. I can't remember her name, his name. And with all them, the two guitarists, one could read chords and the other one could read notes. But the one that could read notes, when he saw a chord written out, he didn't know what it was. He could only do it if the notes were written on the page, right? And the other one couldn't read any notes, he could read chords. So when the act would, when the act would come in, they'd both stand in front of the piano part, right, and go, shit, there's more notes on this than there is chord. You better do this one, you know. and so, like, with those they're doing all songs from shows and stuff, you know, like, so it goes, bong, and I said to him, boom, 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 you know, all this stuff, which the guy that couldn't read the chords, he could sort of get through that, you know. But occasionally they'd get it mixed up. In the first couple of charts, there'd be all notes, but in the next couple it'd be all chords, and he didn't know what to do, you know. But this guy, this female impersonator, he said, we get about 5 songs in. He says, ladies and gentlemen, stop. He said, stop, guys. He said, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, I can't go on. It's impossible to play. I can't do my show with this band. I'm sorry, I have to get off. So he walks off stage, all right? And we go, oh. I mean, I'm waiting for it every day. I'm waiting for that to happen, and finally happens, you know. And anyway, so the manager. So we're out at Mount Pritchard Community Club, you know, which is right out in the sticks near Cabramatta and all that, you know. And the guy, the secretary manager, is a Garbo who races dogs, right? He knows nothing about music.
He's a secretary manager, but he's a garbo.
Yeah, well, that's how you get the jobs out there, you know. So
It sounds like a comedy gone wrong.
he
It
comes
really
on
does.
stage, he goes out and he said, you realise you're not going to get paid for this, to the female impersonator. She said, that's all right. She said, give it to the band for lessons.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, mate, so that's the beginning.
Great.
Give it to the band for lessons.
Oh, that is great.
Yeah, so anyway, now I'm a drummer, right? And I start getting gigs, and I move from there to a couple other club gigs and all that sort of stuff. And finally, getting onto the Duck, I was on the boats for a while, and
Like the big cruises,
the P&O boats,
Yep.
you know, just around the Milk Run, around Vanuatu and all that sort of stuff, which was great. It was a great time. I don't know if you remember on the Jazz Kings albums that you did that song of mine, Rock and Gold,
Yes.
that we did.
Yes.
Well, we used to open the show with that because the reason I wanted to do it in the Jazz Kings, because when we go to the gig, and if it's a different sort of gig, that's the sort of feel we play.
Yeah.
You know, and we didn't have anything on the album to represent what we might do on the gig. So they all doing jazz things and all that, and I thought, will I sacrifice my jazz self for this? So I did. I thought I'll put this on because it's got a lot of harmonies too. And we used to kill them on the boat, you know, because we had really good harmony singers on there. And horns, I had the whole gamut, you know, I could do the arrangement exactly the way I wanted, you know.
Rod plays in a band called the Jazz Kings, and I recorded an album or two of theirs in this particular space.
Yeah, yeah.
So for those people who didn't understand the reference to the Jazz Kings.
Sorry. Anyway, so when I came off the boats, I got a call from two bands. One was the Fiddler's Feast, and Marcus Holden, violin player, who, he's done a lot of stuff. He used to do a lot of string quartets for Jimmy Barnes and Johnny
Diesel.
Diesel, yeah. He's done a few tours with both of them. And but he had a band with Clara Murrah, piano player, violin player, and Gary Steele.
Yep.
You know, one of my favourite musicians in the world, that guy. You know, he's just incredible. Doesn't read. Well, he reads a bit. He would have been good in that first band I was in. You know, he could have played the chords. You know, but man, he can come out with things that just. I have to quickly depart from this to tell you this story about the Bourbon and Beefsteak bar in Sydney, in the Cross, which I was in. And Gary was in that band, and he took Rick Best's place, who was in it. After about 6 months, I used to be playing, and we had 3 or 4 singers in there, and I knew all the songs. I'd be looking at the crowd, and I'd just call out from what I thought it needed at that moment. But I could remember all the songs. I could remember, okay, we need this, we need that. Anyway, after about 6 months, I said, right, boys, I said, we're going to change the way we call the songs. And they went, what do you mean? You know? I said, well, every weekend, we're going to take turns at someone calling the songs. I said, but the only prerequisite is, it can't be like we did it last week. It's got to be a different feel, completely. And they all went, what do you mean? Like we're in a covers sort of gig, you know? And I said, because we're in this place, the Bourbon Bar, they used to have a happy hour, so you get Jackie Osarski and Steve Ball playing in one band and singing, you know, Knock on Wood and Dock of the Bay and all that. And then the next band would come on and they'd do Dock of the Bay and Knock on Wood. And then the third band at the end of the night, they'd come on and they'd do Stand By Me and Knock on Wood, you know. And I said, look, if for no other reason, people come out of there saying, gee, they do it different. I hate what they did, but it was really different. You know, I said, that'll be our crowd, you know.
Yeah,
yeah. And plus, being essentially a jazz player, I wanted to play something different every night, you know, even if you have to play the same songs, you know. so I turned around to Gary and and I'm singing I Can See Clearly, you know. So, you know, I said, Gary, something different, you know. I don't want anything to relate to what we did last week, you know. So normally it's I can see clearly now that the rain is gone, you know.
Yeah.
So Gary goes, and I'm going, what's he doing? You know? So he goes, and on the top he goes, da, 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 with chords, of course, you know. And it was just electric, man. So the drums go, like Birdland, you know. And he goes, but I can see clearly now that the rain is gone. I can see all obstacles in my way. It was sounding like Weather Report doing it, you know, on his own. It was, to this day, I still think about it and go, wow, that's incredible, you know. Yeah.
Well, you got what you wanted. It was different.
Yeah, but and we had a guy, you know, John Coker, the bass player. He was John English's musical director bass player for many years, you know, and a very good friend of mine. And he was in it, and it was his turn to call the tunes, you know, and like he comes from John English and cover bands doing exactly the same thing. That's the whole idea of the night, is to play it exactly like you did it last night.
The show's the same.
Yeah.
No matter what the audience is, they see the same show every night, week in, week out.
So okay, we're doing Dock of the Bay, you know, so his turn to call it in. And I said, John, that's the same tempo we did. That's the same feeling we did it last week. He goes, was it? He goes, but like he has 3 goes to try and make it different because he can't remember he only ever remembers how he did it one way ever, you know. Yeah, I remember one night at the Bourbon Bar, because we used to finish like 5, 6 in the morning, you know, and he's sitting down with the beer and he said, you know, Rodney, I have to tell you, he said, you really fuck with my brain. And we had another story at the Bourbon Bar. Graham Lyle, the saxophone player in Melbourne tonight, he was in the band for 2-3 years, right? And he's a funny man. I love him in pieces. And I used to do Dock of the Bay, and I'd say to the guys, look, I'll just do a drum feel, and just a drum feel. So I go, sitting in the morning sun, I'll be sitting when the evening comes. Right? I'd do my own, and then the band would come in, and it looks like nothing's going to change, right? And Graham, being such a great musician and funny man, he used to come up with his alto while I'm playing on the drums, so I couldn't do anything. I had to have my head in front of the microphone, and he'd come up and stick the bell of his alto in my ear and play. He could play quarter tones, you know, quarter tones above and and he'd play the same melody as I'm singing on my own with the drums, a quarter tone down, and I'd be going, this simple thing of singing this easy tune turned into, it was like playing chess, you know. I go, sit in the morning, so concentrating like it was the hardest thing I'm ever going to do in my life, you know. And then I'd keep it.
Oh man, that would be so hard to do.
And I'd keep it on the money, you know, I'd get it, I'd say, right, he's not there, sitting in the morning sun. And then he'd go above, a quarter tone above, until he got me to like a
shift.
Oh, mate, it's funny days. Yeah. So anyway, are we in the Duck yet?
No, we're not. We haven't made it to Galapagos Duck yet. I get this call when I get off the P&O boats from Fiddler's Feast and John Connolly from the Duck, and that was in just after the Olympics in Sydney. Okay.
And so that was the start of that, and it was interesting. I wanted to do that because the Duck plays so many different feels, And I wasn't I didn't want to go ding, 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 boom, boom, boom for the rest of my life, you know.
Was Willie Qua playing?
No,
in the
Willie,
band then?
it was a sort of a strange thing. I didn't realise it until I got in the band. But Willie was only ever in the band for 3 years. They did a lot of recordings, you know. They did a lot of stuff in those. They were superstars, you know. They got sponsored by Yamaha, they all got a car from a company, I can't remember whether it was Toyota or Holden, or I can't remember exactly who. But they were superstars. They were being flown everywhere, doing concerts with Burroughs, who was the top jazz player. You know, they were getting like 5-10 grand a show back in the 70s, 80s, you know. And they were doing really well, you know, and then I joined them. I soon changed all that. You know. So Willie was in it for 3 years, and then he had a bit of a different opinion because Willie was I want to do it, you know, real go for it.
Another guy that played many instruments very well.
He's a unique character, man. I mean, we used to argue like crazy, you know, but I loved him to pieces because we knew each other from when we were kids,
yeah.
You know. So it was like a brother. You know, you have a brother or a family member that you absolutely love, but they give you the shits 99% of the time, you know. And Willie he'd do things, he'd call it, like I'm the singer in the band, you know, and they're all finding tunes for me to sing. Meanwhile, I'm bringing in tunes that I know will work because I've been doing it for 30 years, you know, like I know these will work. And Willie would come in, why don't you do such and such? I said, why don't you do it? You know, we had such fantastic times with him, and he left it because he argued with his brother and the band lead. And then when that all got out of it, when they all left, and then 20 years later he came back.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So that's how that went. And it was a bit confusing to me too because I'd lost contact with him. But in fact, I have to go back to the Bourbon Bar. I'm sorry, mate.
That's okay.
When Graham Lyle left the Bourbon Bar, we need another sax player. And so I called Willie, all right? And Willie told me not long before he passed away, he said, you know, Rodney, he said, you're the first person that ever got me to do a gig just for the saxophone. I couldn't believe it, you know, because he had a high profile in Sydney.
Man, he played so many things so well.
Yeah, and all the time.
All at once.
I remember he was really struggling before the end came, you know, and we were doing this gig at the Brisbane Jazz Club, and you know, I write these arrangements of different ways of doing things, and I think I was doing Isn't She Lovely, and I was doing like a 12/8 thing. I never thought through love we'd be making one as lovely as she. Yeah, that vibe, you know. And Willie, I don't know, because he used to drink quite a bit, and this day he decided that he wanted to be Billy Cobham. And normally I would give him a tune and give him fours. I'd go out the front and sing, yeah. And he'd normally play the sax, then he'd go and play a couple of tunes. And so I'd give him a fast four so he could play lots of fills, you know. But unfortunately I started with the slow tune this one, and he was going struggle. I knew that there was something going on in his life at that stage because I heard him play with all sorts of people beautifully on the drums, you know, like, so we go, I never thought true love we and da 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 da. I go, oh man. and at the end, I don't know if you know, Willie, bless his heart, at the end he'd always play these incredible drum fills and then screw up or something, and he'd throw the sticks up in the air, you know, and let them fall all over the drums and everything. So I'm doing the big ending. I go, da, 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 da. Isn't she lovely? Isn't she lovely? Isn't she lovely? Made from love, love, lovely love. He throws sticks up the air. Like, I'm trying to sing this tune with heart and feeling, and there's this guy doing monkey tricks behind me, you know, like all the way through it, you know.
Oh, dear.
But look, I heard him play. I've heard him play. We were in Orange, and I said to Willie, I said, mate, can you go and play the drums? I'll go out the front, sound check, just see if anything needs to be done. Matt Baker was in the band, John Connolly, and they just played a song. Oh man, Willie played the best I ever heard him. It was he could do whatever he wanted to do, you know. But if he didn't want it,
depending on what mood he was in. Yeah.
which I loved about him, you know, like we come from the same thing, so I knew what he was doing, you know, like I knew exactly and I knew what he was capable of doing, you know. And anyway, so where are we? We in the Duck yet?
Oh, you're in the Duck.
Oh yeah.
Did you do much recording with Galapagos Duck?
I did 2 albums with them, I think. 2 albums? Yeah, I think 2 albums. Oh, I have to transgress a little bit.
Okay.
In the days where I was coming up, and because of the way I started playing the drums, you know, in those days you didn't have to have, you know, like a BA, Bachelor of Music or something to get a gig. If someone liked the way you played, felt you were in the band, you know. And that's how I got most of my gigs. And every time I'd finish one gig that I wasn't capable of playing, go, oh, wow, I got through that, you know. I hope they don't find out, you know. And I just kept getting all these things that I wasn't capable of doing. But you weren't game to say no, you know. So I did J.C. Williamson's, the shows there for about, I think the first one was The Wiz and the Man of La Mancha and Chorus Line, and all those things of playing with big orchestras under the pit, and you know, that was like huge influence on me, you know, huge influence to be able to play with that many players and control on the drums. You know, it's all right for them, they can go da or bang, da, but when you go bang, there's nowhere to hide, you know. And we were doing Chorus Line, and Richard, I did 3 months rehearsal, just the piano and the drums and the dancers, 3 months rehearsal, you know. Anyway, we get in the middle of the show, and a lot of that stuff was groove stuff, like but that's rock music. But we had a classical conductor, right? And, I mean, he's a lovely guy, I loved him to pieces, good sense of humour and all that, but he didn't know rock music at all. So he used to rel the last 2 beats of the 6/4 bar. So he'd go dun 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 dun. And all the dancers, they're going, trying to move their feet, and there's this rel happening. And anyway, the head dancer, who was a Canadian, if I remember right, she came down, she said, Rodney, she said, we can't dance to what he's doing there. We can hear him pulling the time around. She said, can you not take any notice of him? It's a 40-piece orchestra, right? So... Yeah.
Just ignore the guy who's controlling the whole
That's
thing.
right. So in the end, this is what I did. I went there, I thought, okay, I've got to prime myself up for this. So I'd look him straight in the eyes like I look at you, and he'd go, dun, 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 and I go, dun, 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 take no notice of him, excuse me, look him right in the eyes while I'm doing it, you know, 7 nights a week and 2 matinees, you know.
So was there ever a conversation about?
Nothing. No, because the lead dancers had come down.
But had the lead dancers spoken to the conductor?
No, they wouldn't do that in those things. They wouldn't do that, you know, because they would have known too that he was a classical guy that didn't understand that. He probably didn't even know that he was doing it, you know.
Oh.
You know, it's a strange, when you mix all different styles and people, which is, I had a lot of that, you know, from doing the shows. I got to play with all people from different, you know, a rock guy here, a jazz guy there, a funk guy there, a Latin guy here, you know, it was wow, you know.
Yeah.
It was fantastic, you know. Yeah, but the one I was going to tell you, there's a guy, a bass player called Eberhard Weber. You ever heard of?
I've heard the name.
He did a record called Colours of Chloe. He was the first bass player, you know, the electric upright basses with just the no body, just electric. He was the first guy, right? Anyway, he was famous for playing with Jan Garbarek, a saxophone player, great saxophone player. I forget whether he's from Norway or Sweden or one of the Nordic countries, you know, great player. Anyway, he came out here to do a show, you know, a tour. And he comes out and it's Judy Bailey, Cole Laughlin, who was in Ayers Rock.
Oh, yeah.
He was in that. But he was also in Jazz Co-op. When I was in Jazz Co-op with Roger and Jack Thorncraft and Cole Laughlin and myself, you know. And so anyway, he comes out and does this tour, and it's the Judy Bailey trio, right, playing with him, and he plays all this odd time music like like a boom 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 bam 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 boom 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 bam 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 boom 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 boom, you know, that sort of stuff, you know. But you're sight reading it, right?
Yes.
So, and in those days, you know, I was a good reader, but I hadn't done a lot of that stuff.
Odd time signature stuff.
Yeah, you know, you had to really, I was on the edge of my seat the whole time, you know. And Judy Bailey, who's a wonderful player, you know, but she has her genre that she's great in. She didn't know much. I don't think she was even interested in that music, you know.
Yep.
So he comes in and she's gone, "Hello, Mr. Baber." She gives the music to Eberhard. And Eberhard's such a politician, a sweet guy. You know, he said, "Oh, that's very kind of you, Miss Bailey." He said, "But here's the music we'll be playing." And she goes, "Oh," and opens it up, and there's all odd time music, you know, which wasn't her thing. It wasn't my thing either, really, you know. Anyway, but I could make a fist of it, and
How did she get on?
she didn't do the rest of the tour. You know, it just wasn't working. It wasn't right. Look, don't get me wrong. She's wonderful at what she does. I've heard some things of her when she was really young, and fantastic. You know, really good. Anyway, so the rehearsal goes on, and he says, "Oh, Rodney, in this tune here," he said, "when we come on, I'll just start off with the bass on my own, and I'll do that, and then I'll give you a cue when we're into tickety, right? Okay, good. Okay, so we don't do anything at the rehearsal. We just go into the tune, and when we're on the night we're in the Conservatorium in Sydney, he comes out and he goes." And I went, oh shit! What am I doing here with this? Oh, how come I get like it was? I'd never heard a virtuoso before, like on the bass. Like,
wow!
It terrified me. You know, like I went, what am I going to do? And my legs started shaking.
So none of this had ever showed up in rehearsal?
No, he didn't do any of that. Right? He wasn't a show-off sort of guy. He'd played with all the best American guys. There was nothing for him to show off about, you know. And my brother was a bass player, acoustic bass player. So I'm reasonably ready for what's going to happen, but I wasn't ready for that, you know. And this guy just did things that I didn't think he could do on the double bass, right?
Yep.
And still to this day, the standard that he played at was just mind-boggling, and my legs started shaking, and I couldn't feel them. So they're going like this, and he's going ding 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 ding, and then he gives me a nod. So now we go ding 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 ding, and I still can't feel it. I can't play the bass drum or the hi-hat. I can't feel my legs. Oh. I'm so overawed by his brilliance, you know. And I thought. And that was probably the most important part of my life, you know, because I sat there and I thought, okay, I can't feel my legs. They're going up and down. They're so nervous. They're going like this, right? And I thought, just pretend you don't have a bottom part of the body until it'll probably come back in, but just play this like you're only playing the top part of the kit. So I went ding 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 boom boom ding 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 ding. You know, because I could control the unexpected. That served me really well. I learnt to do it at the most amount of pressure possible, and I never got that again the rest of my life, you know, because it was such a blast of it in the first one, you know. It was incredible, man. He was just something else, you know.
Would you say that would be one of the career highlights, doing that?
Oh, yeah, that was a career highlight. And I did a tour with Herb Ellis and Barney Kessel. That's not good news either, you know. Had it full of...
Because Barney Kessel's Herb. Both those guys.
They were
Amazing guitar players.
well. The rehearsal at the basement, right? So I'm setting my gear up. I'm putting my cymbals on, and he doesn't know whether I can play or can't play it yet. And he said, "Oh, Rodney," he said, "Can I have one of your sticks?" He says, "Oh, yeah, here, Barney." He goes, "Ding, ding, ding, ding." He says, "I don't like that cymbal. Have you got another one?" I went, "Oh, yeah." So I take it off, I put the other one on. Ding. He goes, "Ding, ding, ding, ding." He says, "I don't like that one either. Have you got another one?" I'm going. So hang on, I put the third one on, you know. He goes, "Ding, ding." He said, "I don't like that either." He said, "Have you got any more?" I said, "Look, Barney," I said, "I've got more at home, but if you don't like these, you're going to really hate them, you know. That's all I can tell you." So he went sort of like, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. He said, "Oh, that one, use that one," you know. So I put it on. And so this is the beginning already.
This is a strange start to a thing.
Right, he hasn't heard me play or anything, doesn't know anything about it. If he heard me play and didn't like my playing, I could say, yeah, I can understand this. There's something about that he's heard that he definitely doesn't want, you know. And anyway, now we've set up and he's decided on the cymbal that I'm supposed to use. And he says, right, Green Dolphin Street, you know, Green Dolphin Street. So Latin jazz, you know. So, and at that time I was really into Eto Maria, you know, the guy that played the drums on Spain.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
Not like the Gad El Giro version, but a Brazilian playing the feel. And still to this day, he blows my brain, that Eto, how he does it, you know. So he says, Green Dolphin Street. He says, stop. He said, Rodney, he said, have you got another feel? He goes, playing another feel, He said, stop. He said, you got another one? And so I did about 4-5 feels. And he stopped the last time. He said, all right, we won't do any Latin tunes. And I went, like, Latin tunes is my thing. I'm really... It was the one thing I was sort of known of in the gammy Latin world of the clubs I was playing in, you know. And so I'm going, oh, man, you know, part of me wanted to kill him, you know, like the other part said, you'll never get this opportunity to play with this echelon of people from that era who play with everybody again. So shut up and just do whatever they say, right? So anyway... We play along a couple of weeks, and we end up in Tamworth in the town hall. And by this time, every tune we've played is either a ballad like or and then you go to a double tempo and then it's either ballads, swing, medium tempo, or like East by East West, you know, that song. The fastest I've ever played anything in my life. Even Tommy Emmanuel's things weren't as fast as that, you know. And so you go, 1, 2, 1, 2, yeah. And the one thing I could do was play fast, you know. after 2 weeks of playing fast, medium, slow, medium, fast, medium, slow, everybody's so sick of it, you know, including Barney. And he says, right, let's do Green Dolphin Street. And I thought, right, you prick. I thought, oh, I don't give a shit whether you like it or hate it. I'm going to do what I think, you know. Played it, and I got a drum solo, and I brought the house down. And I went, you beauty, just stick it up here, you know. And when I came off, he said, well, Rodney, he didn't say, oh, gee, that was good, or anything that resembled a compliment or half a compliment even. He said, Rodney, he said, it's not that you can't play. That was his, and the people are applauding like crazy. And I went, wow, this is tough guy, one tough man, you know. When we were in Canberra on that same tour, Dave Ellis, the bass player, he talked to Herb Ellis, his namesake, and said, Herb, tell me, he said, why does Barney give Rodney such a hard time all the time? And Herb said, oh, don't take your nose. He said, look, you got to understand that when Barney, he goes all over the world and he picks up bands, you know, and he said, I'll give you an example. He said he was in England once and he's playing with this bass player who was, you know, pretty good bass player and fancied himself. He said, but he said he kept playing all the time, you know, like. So Barney thought, I'll give him solo and everything, and I'll play him out so he gets tired or can't think of anything more to play, you know. Every tune comes along and fast, medium, fast, play one even faster. And so after 2 sets, this guy's still playing shitloads and too much and all that, and he walks up to Barney. This is Herb telling a story. He said he walks up to Barney, puts his arm around him. He said, well, Barney, he says, what do you think? He said, oh, that's really fantastic, man, fantastic. He said, we just got one problem. He said, what's that? He said, you and me, he said, we need a bass player. What a great story, you know. And he said the reason he's doing that to Rodney, because he walks in somewhere and, you know, I had long hair and looked a little bit...
He's made a judgment call.
He's gone, this guy could be a problem, so I'll fix him from the beginning. And he did, he kept...
Give me a listen to your cymbal. I don't like that one.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
Those two stories of playing with that echelon of people, and there's another one I didn't tell you about. After I'd been playing 2 years, I used to do a lot of playing with Tommy Emmanuel at the Bourbon Bar. He'd come and sit in, and he was Steve Murphy. He was on probably most of the early Renee. Okay. He's a Melbourne guy.
Yep.
You'll see him all over her early albums, you know. Wonderful, wonderful guitar player, man. Like, just, he... Can I digress again?
Sure.
Barry Leaf, you know Barry?
Yes.
Barry Leaf heard him in Melbourne, and Steve had been in the studio from 17 till he was 34.
Wow.
Like every day, doing everybody's sessions, right? He was the guy. And he was a Joe Pass freak, and he decided he didn't want to play rock music anymore. He wanted to get into jazz, you know. But blues, man. Anyway, he just had this feel. So the big night comes. He's got this reputation from Melbourne. Everybody knows Jim Kelly, Rex Go. All the guys there knew of him.
Yep.
And I'd never heard of him, you know. And so they're all there sitting in the seat. I'll never forget it. Steve, they play one of these real soulful tunes, and Steve goes, "Duh." He didn't use pedals or anything. He just did everything with his hands, right? And he went, the song was something like, I can't remember the feel exactly, but if it was like, dum, duck, dum, dum, duck, dum, dum, duck, dum, dum, you go, dum, 4 bars, 8 bars, 16 bars, 24 bars, and by the time he finished his first note in Sydney, one note, the place was in an uproar, right? He hadn't played 2 notes yet, and he destroyed all the guitar players, you know? It was incredible. Oh, I thought, what's going to happen when he plays the second one? You know? No, he was. But anyway, Tommy and I ended up sharing a house with Steve and playing in a band with him. It was fantastic. But so Tommy and Jim Kelly and Steve were really good mates, and they used to do a guitar trio thing.
Yep.
And anyway, I get a call from Tommy one day. He said, "Rodney, I'm going to do an album. You want to? I want you to do it." I've been playing 2 years, and I'm thinking, oh man, you know, like. I said, you sure you want me? I said, if I was you, I wouldn't get me, you know. He said, no, because like in that time, especially in the rock and the country scene, there everybody knew the best players, you know. But if you got those players, you knew exactly how it was going to sound.
Yes.
You know, so they wanted. Tommy was always being adventurous and wanting something different.
He's an amazing drummer himself.
Anyway, so he says, no, I want you. And I go there. It was the first direct-to-disc album that was ever made in Australia, right? So I go there, like I've done one session before, and all of a sudden here I am with this band, and I've got to play 5 songs in a row perfectly. You know, like, and I go, shit, I don't think I could do one song or even half a song perfectly. Now I've got to do 5, you know. Anyway, I held myself together pretty well, but they had a young bass player who was a really good bass player, but unfortunately you get his concentration, by the time he got to the end of the 4th song, his concentration was shot, you know. And the 5th song, we'd have to start again from the beginning, from the 1st song again. You know? You know? No. And this went on and on and on and on and on.
No.
And to top it all off, the beginning of that day, they just set up the direct-to-disc machine in the basement, and I think EMI was on the 10th floor in Castlereagh Street, you know? And there was a click, so when you go boom on the drums, it was going boom, click, boom, click, right? So I did this, I went clang, bang, 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 click, bang, click, bang, click, boom, click, for 2.5 hours.
Oh, because the latency.
Yeah, where they had to fix the problem.
The delay from the basement to the...
They had to fix the problem. So we're there at 7 in the morning. I said, Tom, if I do this any longer, I won't be able to hear any music at all. All I can think of is boom, click, boom, click, boom, click, boom, click. So he got on the drums and did it for another hour, boom, click, and by that time, he had to go to it, because he was doing everything in those days. He was doing Jeff and Jenny Ailing, all the Feel Like a Tooheys people, you know?
Yep.
He was playing bass, guitar, drums, and singing on it, you know? He'd do the whole lot, you know? So we've been 7 o'clock, it's now 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and we still... I think they just got the drums together by 12 or 12:30. And so it was 5.5, 6 hours. I went bang, bang, bang for 3 hours, or probably 4 hours. And I was exhausted, like mentally. I'm thinking, oh shit, now it's the record to come, you know? And so anyway, Tom goes away, does his session, comes back, and we do, I don't know whether it was a side or we had to go at a whole lot. I can't remember exactly. But then he had to go away again to do a gig with a band.
Oh, my God.
So I've been there since 7 o'clock, and we're still there at 10, 11, 12 at night, you know, trying to do this record, you know, 5 songs in a row without a mistake by anybody, you know.
Oh, man.
Tommy and Phil did their 50th anniversary in Tamworth.
Yep.
And, you know Phil, you know Tom and Phil well, do you?
I spent 2 years pretty much living with Phil.
Yeah.
And playing in a... So I knew Phil reasonably well.
Right.
As well as anybody, I think, probably could.
Oh, there wasn't that much that was left in doubt with Phil, was there, you know?
He was a funny man.
Yeah.
I remember doing a trip from the Gold Coast down to Sydney for gigs in Sydney that we were doing, and I probably fell asleep because it was overnight. I think we drove down But I remember at the start of the trip, him telling Johnny Badmouth jokes. And I think I woke up when we were going into Sydney and he was still telling Johnny Badmouth jokes. He loved telling a joke. He was a great, and he was a funny guy. And him and Tommy together were very, very funny. Great, and they had a great thing going together on stage.
Yeah. Well, on this 50th anniversary thing, it was in the Leagues Club at Tamworth, and Fender was supplying all the stuff. Anyway, so they go, I forget what they were playing. I can't remember what they were playing, and so Phil goes, and within the first 4 bars, he blew the amp up. Carrying out other amps, you know. And he tells the story, and the guy says, how do you get that sound, Phil? He says, 10. He says, what do you mean, 10? He says, 10 volume, 10 bass, 10 treble, and 10
everything
mids.
on 10. He used to have this Music Man with 2 12-inch EVM 12Ls in it, and it was stupidly heavy, 130 watt bloody thing it was. And he had a couple of fans in the back of it to try and keep it cool. And I remember at least once where it caught on fire.
Really?
Oh yeah, he had it biased really hot, and he drove it really hard. It sounded amazing, but yeah, I remember it catching on fire at least once.
Wow. Right, where are we up to?
You're playing with Galapagos Duck, and the lineup obviously changes from time to time. How long did you spend doing Galapagos Duck?
Well, I'm still in it, you know. We had a hiatus. John Connolly bought a caravan and went out with his lady away for a year, because he's been in it non-stop for, I've been in it 24 years, and he's been in it. He wasn't in the beginning. He joined in 87, I think. What's that? 87, 97, 40 something years, you know.
He's a talented man.
Yeah,
Plays
yeah.
guitar beautifully too.
Yeah. Well, he was a guitarist.
Oh.
And
then went to bass.
And then went to bass, and you know, like I remember when I first heard him play a solo on there, because he didn't start playing acoustic until quite late. In fact, he ended up buying. My brother was a bass player, and he had a really good Czechoslovakian bass, which Neville Whitehead. You heard of Neville Whitehead, the bass maker who fixed, and Neville really did Wayne's bass up well, and he passed. Wayne, my brother, passed, and this bass did the rounds, and it ended up coming back to Neville, and John now owns Wayne's old bass. Yeah,
wow,
it's a quite amazing story. I went, wow, what are the chances of that happening in the world? You know, the thing that stood out with him, which that grabbed my nose with John, was his solos. You know, when he played like there's probably only Phil Scorchy, the bass player.
Know the name.
He was one of the bass players in Crossfire.
Okay.
He was the second one. Greg Lyon was the first bass player.
Yes.
And Phil was the second one. But Phil was a New Zealander, and he had impetus. You know, some people had the same impetus that Steve Murphy guy had. You know, and he just, you know, all the weather report sort of stuff. He could play it really well, and solos were amazing that he played, you know. Matter of fact, Steve Hopes, who was in Crossfire when he was the bass player, he's just putting a whole lot of stuff on Facebook now of old Crossfire records they were on. By the way, I was in Crossfire for about a year and a half. I wasn't the best drummer in Crossfire, but I was the only one that didn't get the arse. You know, I left to go overseas.
Because Steve Hopes is an amazing drummer.
He was
teaching in Lismore.
That's later on though, isn't it?
Yeah, much. Yeah.
Earlier on, when he came, he was from Townsville, I think. John Watson's from Townsville.
Yes, he is.
You know, they were both, and Steve Hopes helped Watto a lot when he first came there. I knew Watto as a 16-year-old, and what a lot of people don't know about Watto, yes, he's a great rock player and all that, but when he came down from there, he could play Harvey Mason, you know, like all those.
Man, he's got such a good shuffle.
When he was 16, he could play like all the Latin fields.
Yeah.
I've talked to a few people from Melbourne. I kept saying, I never hear him playing Latin. And when he was a 16-year-old kid, he was playing all the stuff. Dang, bang, bang, boom, boom, bang, dang, 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 you know, like I went, wow. And I've never heard of him playing a Latin feel since, and that was 40 years ago.
Well, I guess he's done all of the pop rock records since then, and there's been no call for it, maybe. He's playing with James Rain now, I think, isn't he?
Who was he playing with? No, I was talking to Brendan St Ledger the other day. He was playing with Winnie Matthews.
Oh, okay.
Just recently.
Yeah.
Anyway, this mate of mine, Greg Hook, who builds the studios, right? He was doing an album at Phil Punch's studio. They had all tube stuff.
Probably.
No
Possibly.
digital at all, right? And anyway, so he calls Watto up from Melbourne and said, "Oh, Watto, you want to come up and do a recording?" He said, "Yeah." So anyway, they get there and everything's going well, and Watto says to Greg, he says, "Hey, Greg," he said, "have I got time to go into town for lunch?" He said, "What are you going to do?" He said, "I want to go to the drum shop." He said, "Drum shop?" He said, "Melbourne's the drum capital of Southeast Asia. You can't, you know, there's drum shots to kill, to burn down there. You know, like, why would you want to come to Sydney and buy a set of drums and take them back to Melbourne?" You know? He said, no, there was something in there that I thought I might like. And apparently, Greg tells the story. He said, he said, "Well, so how many kits have you got?" So he bought this kit in his lunchtime, you know. And he said, "How many kits have you got?" He said, "Probably about 53. He said, 53 drum kits? He said,
It's a very specific number.
He said, "Where do you put them all?" He says, "I rent a warehouse." You know, so you rent a warehouse to put 53 drum kits you probably never use at all. He said, "Why?" He said, he said, "Ever since I stopped drinking and taking nefarious substances, I've had all this money and I didn't know what to do." That's the story. That may not be exactly the way it is, but that's the story I heard. Yeah. Steve Hopes was, he was the first guy, you know, in the days, back in my day, Steve Gadd made such an impact that if you couldn't play a Gadd feel, you know, you were almost ostracised or ridiculed, you know. And I heard a million guys, including really top name guys, that I thought, that doesn't sound anything like a Gadd feel to me. Steve was, he could see the elements of it, what it was. Like he could see the non-flashy side of Gadd, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
Like he could play the doom, da, doom, 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 da, and not play a fill.
It's the space in between that's the thing with Gadd, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Like you look at that Ricky Lee Jones song, Chucky's in Love, that dum, ba-dum, dum, ba-da-da-da. Like it's the space in all the right places.
Yeah. With Gadd, you just go, "Oh, geez, that feels good." Mm. You don't worry about how he's holding his sticks or whether he played a fill. You just go, "It feels so good." How does one man make anything he does feel so good, you know?
Yeah.
Incredible. And all, what kills me about Gadd is that it doesn't matter whether you're a guitar player or a bass player or a trumpet player or a bagpipe player, they all hear this great feel from Steve Gadd.
Yeah. I think it's a very similar thing with Jeff Porcaro.
Yeah, he was amazing. I mean, he was Silk Degrees, wasn't he?
Played on Silk Degrees.
And that, you know, what's that tune off that?
Lido Shuffle.
Lido. And what's the other one? The 16.
What can I say?
What can I say? No, there's another one.
Another one. Louis Shelton played on that album.
Really?
Yeah, and I've had him on the podcast.
Talking of Louis, you know, that we just did a album for Charlie Mitchell,
Yes.
young singer, and no, just a couple of tracks, in which Louis was playing the guitar on.
Yes.
And it was really interesting because he was one of his, I read somewhere where Barney Kessel was one of his like heroes, you know,
Yeah.
growing up. And when he was playing the first four chords, he went, bum, ba-dum, ba-dum. I went, that's the same feel that Barney used to have.
Okay.
You know? All I needed was four chords, and it's 50 years ago.
Yeah.
But I went, that's it, that's the feel. I couldn't believe it, you know?
Yeah.
How things stay in your memory, you know? If you got one.
Amazing thing. So, Galapagos Duck continues to this day, but obviously you're doing other projects. You're also playing with the Jazz Kings. Is that an ongoing thing as well?
Yeah, it's I actually left the band at one stage, and then a guy, Richard Goldner, you know,
Yeah, Richard.
he did it, and then he had some problems or something so he had to leave to do something else, and because I wanted a bit of time myself, I'm working on my technique, and I need time to just do it. You know, at 70, when you change something, it's not like changing at 30 or 40 or 50 even, you know. At 70, you've been doing the same thing for 50 years, and it takes a lot of time to get your what do you call it, muscle memory?
Yep.
You know, so
you've got to unlearn something to put something new in, is that?
Yeah. Well, I've always had this belief that the drums, you know, there's a lot of, you know, you go to America and learn off Joe Morello or Jim Chapman, and you come away with all this finger technique. You go like that. You go to a gig and you're going ding ding duck ding 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 ding. You know, you don't use that. Or even swing, ding, 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 bang, ding. But as soon as you start doing all the most people don't want to know you, you know? That because you play like that, they won't get you. You know, so but I listen to it and I just don't hear that stuff. I can't hear. I could play busy, and I have, but I saw a percussionist called Hidalgo and Horatio and conga player, Brazilian guy.
Yep.
Hit home to me that the drums should just be an extension of someone playing congas, you know? And one of the few players that plays like that is Omar Hakim. Do you mind if I go into a bit of drum stuff?
Yeah, you go for your life.
So the idea being, like when you play congas, you're going... right?
Yep.
And you hear these different... Now that's a shuffle.
Yep.
Now that's the one I'm playing with an upbeat. But if I go... That's a lot of rock players play shuffles with the downbeat as one. Right?
Yep.
But I watched a lot of New Orleans guys and guys from Count Basie's band doing two-handed shuffles, and they play the one and the three with an upbeat, right? And that's how they get it to kick,
Yep.
to move.
Yep.
You know, as soon as you play it with a downbeat, it makes everything go heavy. Bonk, dee, bonk, dee, and it sounds like bonk, bee, bobba, da, bonk, dee, bonk, instead of dick, to bing, to bing.
I won't be able to unhear that now.
But I struggled with that for ages, and I thought, why when I play this thing, because I was playing my ones and threes with the downbeat, you know, and it never felt right to me. And whenever I watch someone play, I go, no, that's not doing it to me, you know. Then I saw this guy from Count Basie's band, you know, Diane Shore, the blind white singer.
Yeah.
She was playing with the Count Basie band in Vegas somewhere, and this drummer got this feel, and I went, wow, listen, what's he doing? And I realised that all the ones and threes were all upbeats, you know, like dang, doom, bap, doom, dang, and it pushes. Even the motion that you do physically,
It's got a forward
it's
movement.
got a forward, whereas I'm going,
just sort of dragging things
It's like
back.
riding a horse, you know. Like, but the thing is that has its place too. You've got to be able to do both of them. I'm
Yeah.
not saying one's better than the other. One's used in this when you want this
It's
feeling.
all contextual.
Gad does it automatically with all those things. He just does it. Technique-wise, that was the idea, is that this down and up thing, you know. So for 2 years, I didn't touch a drumstick. I just did this, all right? So I'm going, like, using the hands like this instead of going like this all the time, all right? So that when you do a stroke, it comes like that. So this elbow, like a train, you know, like on the spokes of the train when you got that thing holding on the wheel,
Yep.
and it pushes it. So it's got up and it gets its momentum from pushing, pulling, push, pull, push. Well, that's the same with this. If you use what you've got at your disposal, you've got a lot of push and pull. So if you go like this, and I'm watching them, the Hidalgo, I just watched. I thought, man, that's just like poetry. You
It's
know,
the conga play. It's the conga motion.
yeah. So if you're doing this, it's and like Tai Chi or something, you know, it's the same thing. So when you're doing that, now you start imagining strokes in your head. So you go, back, and then occasionally you do one. And then you do two, and one's an upbeat, all right? And then you do three. But this is all that matters. All the strokes that you play doesn't matter at all because you've got this
Flow.
I may be wrong, but that's what I'm dedicating the rest of your life to.
I should get some drum playing lessons. I always wanted to play drum kit. Pardon
You
me.
do play, don't you?
I'm a terrible drummer, but I love it.
You've got
I
such a good
love
feel on the
playing
guitar, man.
drums. I love it, but I'm a terrible drummer.
I have to tell you, while we're here and getting off me for a second, I heard Scott play on something on Facebook. I heard this blistering guitar, fantastic guitar, and then he started singing. I went, who is this? And I went, it's Scott. I said, I can't believe it, what I'm listening to. And I mean that sincerely.
Oh,
you know,
thank you.
It absolutely killed me. I have to you'll love this story. I did a tour with, I Got Sunshine and a Cloudy Evening. Who's the band that did that? Temptations, was it? Anyway, so I got called to do a tour with them, right? And it wasn't my thing. I haven't spent lots of time like you have in those bands. I've played a lot of the music, but being jazz influenced, so if I do My Girl, which I've sung shitloads of time in my life, I've always gone, why do they do it like, dum, dum, I guess you say what can make me. I thought it's a song like, it's like a heartfelt sort of song, and I don't get any of that vibe out of it when I hear it like that, you know. So I always do it like, I got sunshine.
Until you watch the guys do it and you realise that all those dance moves and the...
Yeah, but it was more than that. It was more than that because I played with Barry Leaf and Jim Gannon, a guitar player, who great singer, Jim, English guy, and they'd all do that, going, ding, dun, 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 I guess, you know, and I was going, oh, fuck, I don't feel anything out of this, you know. I got to do it with the guy who did it even faster than that, and he was, because all the guys from the Temptations are either dead or in wheelchairs now, you know, but he was the first guy that came in first. When someone left or died, he was the first guy to come in, and he'd taken it over from then. So
Yep.
he'd had it for like 20, 30 years. So he sang it, right? And he had something wrong with his back, and like he could hardly walk on stage, but because he was supple black guy. He could pretend like he was pain-free, and he'd get out there and go, and I'd be going, dum, 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 and they used to do this song to get all the chicks to come up on the stage, right, to dance with them.
Yeah.
So there'd be all these singers dancing with all these chicks on stage. I just think, why'd they pick this song? They got a million songs in there, like dun-dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun-dun. They used to do that, right? I thought, why don't they do it to that? But no, it had to be My Girl, right? 25 minutes of playing that field for my Girl while they sang the tune, did all their spiel, got the chicks went down in the audience, dragged them up on stage, did the dance, got them back off the stage, and then finished the tune off. Like it was, it went on and on and on and on, And anyway, this guy, that when it first came out, I thought, not My Girl. And this guy came out, I got, like the sound of his voice, the way he phrased it, I went, that's why it works,
Yeah.
I've been playing it for 20 years and never had that feeling once of anyone. When he sang it once, I knew straight away.
The phrasing of the vocal.
Everything about, I don't know where the eerie comes from, or in that band they had one of the singers. He had a drug problem, so he couldn't go to. He got caught for drugs, which they wouldn't let him into New Zealand, but he did the Australian part of the tour. But he was the guy that sang on the Michael Jackson movie. I can't remember his name now, but what a singer he was. Well, like wow, and they all moved like unbelievably. But when this old guy came out, they were all virtuoso singers like that. But when he came out, the guy with the back and all that, it made it, that was all just superfluous.
The feel just...
there's a million of them could do that. There's only one or two that can do what he could do, And that was a great lesson in that music, And the good thing was, in that band, in the singers and Five Temptations, 3 of them were drummers, right? And so I said to him, I said, look, boys, I said, this is not... I didn't grow up playing this music. I said, if you have anything that you can tell me that might make me play it better for your show, feel free to tell me. Well, it opened the floodgates, like every 5 seconds I was getting, try this, do that, And there was 2 of the guys weren't that great drummers. They were good, but one was fantastic. But I mean, not in a technical sense, but he came from Chicago, I think it was, and when he played a 16th field, it sounded like I'd never heard a 16th field before. After Mark Kennedy and all these different guys playing, and Greg Tell, who I had a couple of lessons off Greg, and but this guy, when he played it, I went, wow, how are you doing that, man? It's just tick, 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 duck, tick, 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 duck, tick, 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 tick. And I'm looking at him do it, and what I'm hearing and what he's doing don't add up. It shouldn't sound like, it shouldn't feel like that, And I go, tick, tick, it didn't feel anything like it. And I thought, do it again, And I said, why? Tell me. I said, man, that's just fantastic what you're doing on the drum. What are you doing this? He said, in Chicago, he said, when I play on the drums and singing, he said, 7 hours I'd be playing, but really hard, like there's none of this real soft thing. And he said, forget the tastefulness and all that. He said, it was just full on banging all night, 7 hours. And he said, I did that, you do that for 20 years. And you get tired. He said, this gig, he said, I come out here, I sing a couple of tunes, go home to my hotel room, and Bob's your uncle,
We did a session here with Louis Shelton playing guitar and Louis producing young Charlie Mitchell. Do you get to do much session work? And
I did a lot of session work in Sydney because when I joined Crossfire, when you work in those days in Sydney, if you were in Crossfire, you did everything.
Okay.
You know, and I went from, I did a few recordings and all that, but when I joined them, I was in there every day. You know, Jim was one of the hardest working session players there was.
Jim Kelly.
Yeah, so, which that was a great learning curve for me too.
Did session work back then pay well?
I wasn't one of those money. You can tell. You can tell by my car that it's not been at the forefront of my life. You know, I never really spent. I was so worried about playing the drums, and I was so out of my depth all the time that I never thought about money. You know.
Obviously, you made enough money to make a living and get by and make a
Oh
life.
yeah. Look, because I did a lot of things, you know, like I did shows. I did the J.C. Williamson shows, which is a reading thing. So I would get reading. I'd always get offered reading gigs, and but then I started working with Jazz Co-op, which was at that time one of the top outside jazz bands.
What's on the horizon for Rod Ford?
A nice plot somewhere where people won't disturb me, you know, if you can practice when you're down 6 feet under, you know, that's what I'm looking forward to, you know, like no phone calls, no paying bills and all that. I just get in my coffin and for the rest of my life work on this thing, you know, if I get enough elbow room, you know. No, mate, I'm doing Sweet Thunder.
Yes.
And I'm playing when Rick put it together, because Rick's got
So Sweet Thunder is a large big band.
Yeah, 14-piece big band. It's slightly smaller than your normal big band, which he rewrites everything he has to do because of it to make it sound. But when he put it together, he wanted to do all the early particularly Duke Ellington Band, which is named after one of Duke's songs, Sweet Thunder.
Oh,
you know?
okay.
And early bassy things, of course, you know. I didn't know that music very well, like that era of music. And I thought, here's a chance to find something about it, you know. And so I went back and looked at a lot of the really old black and white things of Baby Dodds and those early Count Basie and Ellington bands and before those bands, you know. And I got the shock of my life, you know, because they kicked ass like you wouldn't believe.
Oh.
You know? I always sort of thought of I didn't really have much idea because I was too busy in the, you know, I was more interested in Eto Maria and going ding, ka-dang, ding, ka-dang, you know. But when I went back there and I'm listening to these guys in black and white things, they go, one, a two, a ding, 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 dong, 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 you know, like playing the shit out of it.
Yeah.
And that feel was incredible, you know. I went, this is a huge hole in your it's like the beginnings of our music, popular music, which I knew nothing about. You know, and I went, oh. It was
So
sort of
it's like a whole brand new discovery.
it was a shock to my system, you know, and it sort of hit me that how much impetus the music had, you know, like you know Ray Brown, the bass player, you know, when he plays, he gets it like doom 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 doom.
There's a lot of energy in it.
And Christian McBride is very similar to that field, you know. And I thought, why is there only one guy a bit like Gad, why is there only one guy that makes it feel like that, you know? And then I went back and listened to all these old big band things and they all had to play like that because there was no microphone, there was no amplifiers, you know?
Yeah.
And they're all going, boom,
So they're being
boom,
quite aggressive.
boom. Yeah, and kicking ass.
A lot of energy, a lot of drive.
Yeah, and I was absolutely blown away. Ronnie Scott, that's another big eye-opener. I didn't know much about Ronnie Scott, and I put on a couple of things of him playing these tunes. He was incredible. I mean, not just good, but incredible, you know. And I can't believe that all that I grew up with all these jazz players that I never heard them mention Ronnie Scott once, you know? But they're calling tunes like 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. There's one tune there, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. I mean, you may not like playing fast, but it's a sign of the musicianship you have. Like playing ballads is important. You know, in those days, Oscar Peterson, Buddy Guy and those sort of guys, Tommy Emmanuel, Chet Atkins, those guys, you know, they all, it's playing fast is just an emotion like playing slow is, you know.
Sweet Thunder is the big thing that's happening for you now. I think that there might be some recording coming at some point with Sweet Thunder coming into the studio.
Oh, all right.
I think Rick was saying he had some tunes that he'd written a long while ago that he wants to record.
Yeah, he's done a suite of what's it called? Not the Hobbit suite. Something like that. It's one of those books. I'm an illiterate drummer. I don't really know.
So yeah,
much
I'm
about
looking
that.
forward to that because that's something. It's not something that I don't get a chance to record very often, and it's always an amazing thing to be in a room with that many people making. It's a big sound.
Yeah,
It's a lot of fun.
I haven't done record. That's the first time I've done recording for quite a while. Well, certainly since I've been here, and a couple of years before I came up here. So 10 years. It was a bit of a It was. I thought, wow, you know. And then you locked me behind all this glass thing. I couldn't hear the bass. I couldn't hear half the band I was playing
So
with.
in the recording process, we had the whole band in this particular room, and it was a 15-piece band. So in order to get some isolation for the drums, I put a big Perspex screen around the drum kit. But yeah, so Rod had a bit of difficulty hearing all the other parts, but that was mainly because we wanted to get isolated sounds for the kit.
And I have to tell you this because I thought this might be one of the questions that Scott asked me today, like, what was it like? And I said, well, playing drums in that fashion, it was sort of like making love to someone that's 6 feet away, and neither of you know if you've had an orgasm at the end of it, you know.
And so Louis Shelton is producing this particular recording, and hopefully we'll get to hear the end result pretty soon.
Yeah. I heard a guy say once, he says, it doesn't matter where you're from. I think it was about Bill Evans, you know, the piano player.
Yep.
And because Bill didn't give a shit about what people thought about him, he knew what he wanted to do, and he knew it was going to take all his life to do it, and probably never get there exactly what he wanted anyway, you know. But that didn't matter. It was the journey that was important to him.
Yep.
And he'd play Autumn Leaves 4,000 times, but he spent 3 months trying to find the right key to play the song in. He'd go home and he'd play it days on end, go, no, that's not the right key, and then play it again. 3 months to try and find the right key to play it. And he could play anything in any key.
That's being incredibly pedantic.
You know, just the sound of the strings, the way they've vibrated together. Is that right? Does that give me the thing? Imagine that. Imagine having
that much spare time.
Yeah. That's very
That'd
good.
be wonderful. I wish I could be that self-indulgent. That'd be wonderful. Anyway, thank you very, very much for your time today, Rod.
Pleasure, mate.
It's been a wonderful experience and a learning thing for me to listen to the stories and the path that you've been on. Hopefully there's something in that for people listening. And thank you for sticking around to the end. And hopefully we'll see you on the next one. See you guys.
Bye.